Hello, and welcome to the All Things Narrative podcast, where we explore the relationships between the stories we love and the stories we live. I'm your host, Derrick, and let's get started. All right, what's up, everyone out there? Back in action at the top of the month with another exciting episode and a story. And boy, is it going to be a story today, because I have with me the one and only Rena, who we're going to get to know here in just a moment. Before we hear Caroline's story and learn more about her and the wonderful work that she does, I just want to invite you to check out allthingsnarrative.com, follow us on social media, and subscribe so that you never miss more great stories, because we believe that everyone has a story to tell. And this is a place where people can tell their stories meaningfully, and hopefully that's inspiring to people like you out there. So thank you so much for tuning in. And now, without further ado, I want to introduce to you the one and only Rena.
Woo! You keep saying the one and only. I'm like, oh my gosh, I am actually right.
Yeah. And even if there's another Rena out there, you're the only one that I know, the only one here doing this podcast.
And the only one that's me.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
Yes.
So Caroline is a transformational coach. And we're going to get more into what sort of transformation Caroline does and what she's interested in. She's also a fellow podcaster. So she had a podcast called The Ride of My Life, where she, through podcasting, worked through her healing journey. And so we're going to get to hear her story and what she does as a coach, and lots of exciting things, because we met a few months ago at a networking group right here in Lake Worth.
Yeah.
And we were just talking for a little while at different times. And then you came out to one of our storytelling events that we do every quarter. And that was your first one. So if you don't mind me asking, what was that experience like for you, for coming into this place where people just get up on stage, tell their stories, right? What was that like for you?
I have to say it was really powerful, because for most of my life, even though inside of myself, I felt powerful to a point, I was kind of always pushed down into that whole not good enough space. So I never came out and showed the real me. And that particular event was, the reason it was so powerful was because I was able to step out on stage to talk. Like, I've done it before for singing. However, for talking, that's always been a challenge for me. So it gave me that opportunity to share my story of healing and connect with others who have also been through things, because I feel like most people have been through trauma.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
So it's huge.
The connecting piece, right? Because when we tell our stories, it's an invitation to say, let's connect. And we all have our own traumas, things that we've been through, that we've worked through, right? And so part of the human experience is not holding that in, right?
That's
not
right.
Not letting that stay within our bodies, within our beings, within our spirits, but actually being able to heal. And part of that healing is finding that human connection with other people.
Right.
And being open about our experiences, right?
Right. Yeah. And that had always been a huge issue for me, especially over the last, I want to say, 4 years. Because when I was working through the things that I was working through in the last 4 years, I stepped back from people. And I put myself in a place of isolation because I was so fearful of being with people, because everything hurt. Like, I'm being highly sensitive or empathic. I pick up on other people's energies, and I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, I was wondering, because that's something that a lot of people might not be familiar with. So can you tell us a little bit more about what being an empath means, what that entails?
Sure.
And how that's been a part of your life.
Right. So being highly sensitive, I'm both. Being highly sensitive has to do with, it's a trait. It's an actual trait. So we were born with it. 15 to 20% of the population is highly sensitive, and I think it runs similar with empaths.
Okay.
So the difference between highly sensitive and being an empath is, as a highly sensitive person, you feel deeply. There's like most people can go through things and, wipe themselves off and move on.
Right.
For highly sensitive people, it's more of a, I can feel like the energies that are going on around me.
Mm-hmm.
And back in the day when I wasn't 100, I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
I used to be told things like, oh, you're so sensitive, you're dramatic, you cry too much. Why don't you stop crying so much about everything? And it had nothing to do with whatever was going on. It had to do with me feeling all the stuff around me so deeply that I couldn't manage it.
Now, when you say feeling everything around you, are you talking about is it like a physical sensation? Is it emotional, mental?
It depends on the highly sensitive person.
Okay.
For me, it's very physical. I literally feel it in my nervous system.
Wow.
So on top of that, having the trauma that I experienced growing up and throughout my life, that kind of like stacked on top of each other. And so I knew what it felt like when someone was going through pain. I could feel the depth of their pain as well. And that's where the empath piece kind of comes in too, where you can feel other people's energies, whether they're sad or happy or, like I used to do things like walk into a room and I'd see someone with a look on their face or whatever, and I'd say, "Are you okay?" And they're like, "I think so. How do you know?"
Wow.
So that's how powerful that can be. But I didn't recognize that in myself. So that's where.
How was it that you came to realize that that's what it was? Was it did somebody like come along and tell you one day, or did you discover it?
I think I love research.
Yeah.
So I tend to look deeply within myself anyway as I was going through my journey.
Yeah.
And it was just a point in time where, I was like, well, this sounds interesting. And it just popped in. I can't even tell you how it came into my life. It's just something that came in and I'm like, maybe I need to look into this. And I did this with everything.
Yeah.
So that's how I progressed on my journey. And this was part of that. And it helped me to recognize something about myself that was not something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And I got so tired of thinking I was broken and that there's something wrong and that I needed to fix myself. And I know that's what a lot of people feel that way, especially nowadays.
There could be something so liberating about having that sense of clarity, right?
Oh my gosh.
When you find something, you find the language for it.
Yes. And that's I'm glad you brought that up because language is important for me. Writing is important for me.
Yeah.
I've been journaling since I was 10, something like that. For me, a word clarifies the beginning of the journey that I go on with that word, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
And so like with the highly sensitive or empath, it's like, oh, okay, so let's go down this road and see what it's about and see if I, resonate with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. I've told people something similar in that, sometimes you just have to try something and see how it sticks, how it connects with you. And a lot of that is language, right? And I think, we're in a time right now where it's very interesting when you look at language and all these different things.
What's interesting about it is that a lot of us that I'm discovering in my own journey don't know the language of who they are,
right?
Of the truth of who they are. We're told who we are, and we go through our lives thinking that we're going on this journey of this one version of language when there's another direction of our truth, but we get to find out what that is.
Well, and that's one of the things that I read that you do is you help people to kind of discover what they want, right, in life. And that's a huge part of what I do in terms of narrative practices and stories, right? Because we talk about the difference between, you ever heard the difference between an internal state and an intentional state? So internal states are things that like are innate in you, but you can't really control them. You don't really have a say what they are, right? So this would be like your strengths finder your Myers-Briggs, like those kind of things, right?
It's already given.
Yeah, exactly. It's flat.
Okay.
And all you have to do is just figure out what it is, and then you kind of move on from there.
Right.
What I do, and maybe this will resonate with what you do as well, with narrative practices is we're more interested in intentional states. So in other words, what are the things that you are intentional about deciding for your own life? So besides wants, some of the other things that we have categorized under that as well would be things like hopes, dreams, values, beliefs, sense of purpose, commitments, skills, knowledge. These are all things that you have to make an active choice in, right? You have to decide, what are my values going to be? You might have values that are given to you or that you're raised up in, but at the end of the day, you have to make a decision.
Absolutely.
Of which of those values you're going to take, which values do you need to go out that you want to live by. And same with any of those categories. So does that kind of connect with what you're doing?
It does. This is almost the next level of what you're talking about is like the next level of what I do, because there are people out there who have these belief systems that we carry within ourselves from being taught as children,
right?
You know, that we're not good enough. Like there are amazing creative people out there who were told, well, that stinks.
Yeah.
You know, you're not worth it. This is and they hide. And so that becomes a belief system.
Right.
And it's a lie, right? So if you've been hugely traumatized, because there's versions of trauma, there's, micro and macro traumas. Yeah. You hold these belief systems within your nervous system, and you keep running the story within your beliefs, right? And,
it's literally in your brain.
Well,
like if you go to neuroscience, right?
Yes, it's all both. It's a connective thing.
So tell us a little bit more about that connection there in between like the brain, the nervous system, because I'm very familiar with like the neuroscience, but I'm not as familiar about how it relates with the rest of the body.
So if anyone has ever heard of mind-body, they talk about mind-body. So the mind and the body work together. Yeah. It's part of it. So the heart actually has a brain in it. The gut has a brain in it. The brain has a brain. So everything is connected, in the heart, and our feelings and emotions and all that connect everything together. Yeah. With the mind, we start to ruminate. We start to think. We think 60,000 thoughts a day, and most of them nowadays are negative. So it adds to that belief, those belief systems that we have. Then we feel worse about ourselves. So by moving forward through the process into the nervous system, and I can tell a story about how I figured this out. I had an email sent to me one day from my insurance company after I traded my car in. And they were like, oh, yeah, your insurance rates will go down, whatever. And they sent the email. And it said my insurance rates went up like $200, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. You get
punished for having the latest thing.
Right.
Something that's going to be, better for,
and safer,
gas mileage, safer.
Whatever.
Yep, I felt the same way.
Yep. And so what happened was I've done my work up until this time, and I knew the language, and I knew everything going on, and I was the observer watching, what was happening. Yeah. And I got this email, and thank goodness I was at a friend's house. He held space for me during this, because I got up, my nervous system kicked in, my stress response kicked in, and I'm walking around, I'm shaking, and I'm like, I couldn't breathe, all this stuff that normally happens when you go through a stress response, right? Yeah. And I'm like, what the heck is happening? Because I know logically I'm safe, right? But our stress response, our nervous system, is there to protect us from a tiger chasing us, right? But in our day and what goes on in this time frame at this point in life is we have gotten stuck within that stress response system. So when we get in it, the body takes over. And it's very difficult for your mind to say, unless you've done some of the work and understand the wording, is for your mind to say, oh, no, you're okay. It's okay. You're going to go around, oh, my God, all this kind of thing. And so being able to heal the nervous system from doing that's called dysregulation. Okay. And there are people out there who have been so traumatized that they're so dysregulated that they have a hard time regulating themselves. Yeah. So there's many different processes on how to do that. But the connection between the mind and the body is the main part of this, because if you get to a point through meditation and through, different ways of healing, that you're able to slow that down and not fall into that hole and not feel like you're crashing and burning.
Yeah.
And that's that's the work I needed to do. And that was the starting point when I saw that, because I'm like, why am I freaking out when I know that I'm safe right now?
Yeah. So how did you go about learning how to do that? Like, is that something that you researched? Did you talk with people about it? Was it things on the internet? Is there like formal training in it?
So most of the things that I did were hearing about things, or something comes up, or a friend reaches out to me and says, hey, now I know what's going on. Let's try it out. And so for that year that I was on the podcast, that I did my podcast, I was traveling throughout the United States in that car that I bought with the insurance rates going up, right? And I went to a couple of different places where I stayed with some friends of mine who actually guided me through somatic body work. And it's the somatic piece, which is the body, rather than the analytical piece of it, that helped me to learn how to settle my nervous system.
Yeah.
So there are things like tapping and breath work, and there's a lot of different things out there, but these were a couple of the things that I discovered in the process. And it was interesting because I'm not afraid to try something new. I don't really care. I don't care what it is, as long as it's going to help me, right?
Sure.
And sometimes, so it's a little troubling a little bit, but just being able to discover that and notice a year and a half later that this like I used to dissociate. I used to if something made me feel like I was in a situation, even if I wasn't, I would literally go into my mind's closet.
Yeah.
And hide out in there. And I did that up until 4 years ago or 3 years ago.
Was that something that existed like when you were younger, or is that something that kind of came over time?
That existed when I was little.
Okay.
It existed as me going in my closet.
Okay.
Literally.
Yeah.
Because when I was a child, if something scared me or whatever, I would go inside my closet to feel safe. As an adult, if you go in a closet, somebody's going to think, and of course you already think you're not good enough, right? So you don't do those things. You switch it up, but you're still using the same protective mechanisms that you use as a child.
Right.
But you're an adult now. Now this is the piece where you get to take responsibility for what's happening in your life and recognize that I have to say, to begin with, when you were a child, it wasn't your fault.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to you was not your fault.
Right.
When you get older, though, it is your responsibility to recognize what happened to you as a child and learn how to walk through what went on and heal yourself, so you don't have to live your life like this, because I just turned 59. It gets worse when you get older. So if you don't start doing something when you recognize it, it's going to start hurting more and more and more until you do. And it's not anything to punish you. It's more of a, like, the universe is doing this for you rather than to you. It's just like,
Well, it's being in tune with your own being, right?
Absolutely,
because I think a lot of the time our bodies try to tell us things, you know? And I mean, we know the obvious things, right? Like if you stub your toe, your body's like, hey, that was not, watch where you're going, right? That hurt.
Yeah, right.
But there's other things that we don't always think of that our body is communicating to us,
I have to use, interestingly, it's not even about thinking. It's about paying attention to and feeling it. Because we were programmed, especially my generation, we're programmed not to feel our feelings. So if we can't feel our feelings, we freeze.
Interesting.
And that's part of the nervous system, too. That's part of the fight or flight.
Yeah. I definitely think my generation was a little different. I feel like feelings were all the rage growing up.
Well, and I'm glad that happened, too. And I'm noticing, I find that I'm connecting more with. Which generation are you in?
Millennial.
You're a millennial. Okay. So every generation from about 38 down to about 16 to 18,
Yeah.
there's a whole, you guys are wise. There's a wisdom in there that we didn't know about. And we're the ones, I feel like my generation were the ones that had to learn all the things that, like, my generation was 60s. It was the, hippie generation. And I came out of that hippie generation. So they started this process for us.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for the hippies, you guys wouldn't even know what it was.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
In a way. But coming to this earth after we did, you already know this anyway, intrinsically.
Yeah.
If that makes
sense. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, we had our whole subculture, when I was in high school that I was a part of, with the emo like subculture, and it was all about emotion, like feeling emotion, right? And then, so there were a lot of things about that can really breed empathy, that can breed understanding, right? And then I think I'd love to hear your perspective on this. I think one of the pitfalls in my generation that, as we were working through this is kind of like that, oh, well, you just have to feel everything all the time, and everything you feel is good and justified and right. And that's kind of where I'm like, as I've gotten older, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I think I felt some things that were not good, that were not right, and they were real, but they really needed to be dealt with, right?
Yeah.
So what's your take on that?
So my take is that there's a pendulum. And in life, the pendulum always swings. It's always going from one extreme to the other extreme to the other extreme.
Yeah.
Constantly. And until
true.
Wake that up in yourself and recognize that pendulum's going back and forth.
Yeah.
That like you're saying you did. That you're like, wait, this isn't right. This doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel right to me, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's almost as if it's this wake-up call that comes in. How old are you?
I'm 31.
Okay, so you're in the perfect spot for that, because between the ages of 28 and 31, there's for those of you, I don't know, listening if you know about this, but there's a thing called a Saturn return. It's in astrology. And the Saturn return is you're in your first Saturn return. I'm actually in my second one. When you're in your first one, you're looking outside, you're trying to figure all these things out. What's my life look like? What's happening? I got to do this. I got to do this. With the second Saturn return, from what I understand, you start coming inward and becoming who that was that works for you.
Yeah, I've heard something similar in terms of, and it's partially psychological, partially like different like cultural discourses, but the idea that like the first half of your life, you're really focused on like, I don't know if outward is the right word, but you know what I'm saying? Like you're really focused on like, ooh, I got to achieve this. I got to go to school. I got to get married. I got to have kids. I got to, all the checklists, right? Of all the things you got to do. Yep. You got to get a job, get a career going. But then like you get to like around maybe like 40-ish. And let's say you've arrived with all those things, right? Quotes, exactly. Air quotes, arrived. But that journey inward is something that I've heard the second half of your life is really all about. And it's not that you don't have an inward journey in the first half of your life, because you obviously do in order to get to where you are, but it's that you as a person become really focused on that inward journey, which is one of the things that at first really surprised me, but it's become less surprising as time goes on, is people ask me, what age group most wants to work with you? What would you say?
You're asking me that
question?
question?
What would you think? For me.
It's interesting because I keep getting pulled into that 18 to 38-year-old, skimming up into maybe 45. Yeah. But it's not my generation. I feel like it's because I don't know what it is, and it's been happening a lot for me that I've attracted all these old souls and like you're an old soul, okay?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'll embrace that.
Okay, cool. So, old souls and the highly sensitive and the empaths, but this 18 to 38-year-old piece of it, part of it for me is I learn from them too.
Yeah.
You know,
oh,
and it's
absolutely.
important also for them to know that they're heard as I am learning from them.
Yeah.
And for that generation to know that, like, I don't even know how to explain this because I'll just say it. So your generation is here to change the world.
That's what we were told. You're the world changers.
However, I'm not saying it as a pressure cooker thing.
Right.
I'm saying it as your embodiment into this lifetime is with the wisdom that you carry and with the knowledge that you carry in with you through DNA, ancestral DNA, whatever that is. You're here to change the systems that are breaking down. And what you know are things that we didn't. And I feel like I have been placed here to kind of guide that.
Yeah.
And that's why I connect so well with that age group. So that's usually the ages that are coming.
See, it's so fascinating how that happens because for me, I'm younger. I'm 31. But for me, most of the people that want to work with me are over 50. Which is so fascinating because I did not think for the life of me all these people would want to work with someone so young. But
why?
Well, this is where we get into my discourse, my insecurities, right?
Okay.
Yeah, always been uncomfortable with the fact that I look like if you physically see me, right, I'm shorter. I look really young. I always get carded, mistaken for,
You'll like that at my age, but go ahead.
Yeah, I still don't like it now.
Okay.
But I've always been just a little like, okay, how do I make myself look older, appear older, like all that kind of stuff. And somebody told me that worked with me and still is working with me. They said, well, your youthfulness is what attracted me to wanting to work with you. I was like, what? And I was like, I didn't believe it. Like, I was blown away. I was like, no way. Like, really? And they're like, yeah, like, you're just so lively and passionate about what you're doing. And you're also like not super like set in everything, right? You're open to the person that you're with, but at the same time, you know a lot of things and you're confident in what you know. So it's like, I was like, oh, I've never been told like that before from someone of that age, So that was really meaningful to hear that. And it changed my perspective on things.
Well, I'm glad it did because that was what drew me into you as well. Because my generation, at least from my perspective of my experience of it, is very like everything has to be like this. Everything's got to be, serious. Everything is, and I've lived my life that way. And when I come across somebody like you, your energy, your wisdom, your understanding, your excitement, it's like, oh yeah, cool. Now I can be myself. I don't have to be that serious adult.
Yeah, that's like a theme I've noticed a lot. Like I used to do drum circles out in like downtown West Palm Beach.
Okay.
Just for fun. Just people got a bunch of drums. People just can come and we play together, Nothing weird about it or anything, just playing music. But, doing that and in general, just when you're teaching people like music, it's really fascinating because with drums, I've had people who like have come to drumming things I've done and they're just like cross arms. I don't think I'm going to be good at this or I don't know if I'm going to like this. I'm like, just try it. But then once people like have that freedom to just play and just let their body, let the rhythm, let all that happen.
Yep.
They just come alive. And I just feel like in this world that we're in, there's that disconnect. I feel like this conversation is coming back to the mind, body, spirit, like that whole, those things all working together, And I feel like for a lot of people, because of maybe the pressures of society or the discourses that they've been inherited, it's hard for people to just kind of let go and be free. Even I get embarrassed to dance. That's still one thing that I have a hard time with publicly is just dancing, unless I'm really comfortable with the people there.
Yep.
But it's something I've, worked on.
Yeah.
And I think we all got our things that we're working on, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I want you to know though that everyone especially the people who are listening to this and are interested in this, there's a process that we all go through that you want something. You want something bigger than yourself.
Absolutely.
You want that as part of your life. The interesting thing is that we've had it trained out of us
what you
with
want.
societal rules and laws and all these different things. And I'm not saying go out and break laws or whatever. What I'm saying is that it doesn't help us to realize who we are. It doesn't help us to realize the truth of who we are. And who we are is this amazing spark of light and love and connection and humanness and metaphysicalness and all of it. We're all of it, but we're taught and we're taught not to be that. And so when it comes into our lives, then we're like, well, what the heck is this? I don't understand this. I'm not supposed to do this.
Well, and to bring it back to stories, right? I mean, stories are about characters that want something and they have to overcome, a problem to get that, right?
Yes.
And to get what they need as well out of that. But it's so fascinating because if you look at a lot of, really well-known stories out there, even think of ones that you really resonate with you, a lot of the times there's a character that wants something that's at odds with, the tribe or the village or the town, right? Or the family. And hands go up, right?
Hands go up.
And it's recognizing that that's part of the journey.
Yes.
And it's going out there. It's going out and embarking on the adventure. Like you're familiar with the hero's journey. So it's like you have that call to adventure, that sense of, I want something bigger than myself. You've got that refusal where you're like, I don't know. I don't know if I could actually do that. I don't know if that's for me. But then once you go forward, once you cross that first threshold, right? And then you go into the unknown, right? When you go into that space there. And that's when you're, as Joseph Campbell talks about, that's when you're going inward, right? So you're going deeper and more inward, right? And further,
The universe opens up for you because that first step, that all it is taking or making a choice. And then the minute you make that choice, everything starts to converge, but sometimes you don't even know that that's happening. But the minute you take that step, like you're saying, that's when things start showing up for you. That's when, you're like, well, I don't have enough money to do this. And I don't know where I'm going to go. And I don't know this. And I don't know. Every single time that I fought that and resisted it, I was in pain. When I didn't, things just started showing up to help me move along this journey, And that's the cool thing. So absolutely.
Well, and that's why it's interesting to explore the relationship between like stories that we encounter that are like fictional, and then our own psyches, right? And then how that plays out in our lives. So again, the hero's journey is a great example of that. You encounter that in a story, something in you lights up, and you're like, oh, that's it. I really like that. Why'd you like it? I don't know, but I guess it inspired me. It was meaningful. I don't know. But then there's something in your psyche, right? The human psyche, because that's one of the things Joseph Campbell talks about is like these stories transcend cultural boundaries. Like how on earth is it that Native American stories over here, Chinese stories over here, ancient Mesopotamia, Jewish story, like there's similar ideas that they really value, right? And it's interesting to kind of compare and look at, oh, wow, like this thing, you could pick any of those stages of the hero's journey and you're like, oh, wow, this manifests in this mythology and this religion and this culture, right? And you're kind of like, oh, wow, what's going on here? And there's something in the human psyche that comes out with this. And there's something about when you fight that, it's exactly what you said, where you almost feel that tension, that pain within you, right? But once you realize that that's where you are and that's what's happening, there's a greater degree of almost surrender to it.
Absolutely.
In the sense of, okay, like I'm in a story now. I'm here and I don't want to run away from it. I want to go more inward. And that's the harder part, right? That's the hardest stages is when you go deeper and inward. But
and the inward piece of it, I have done a little bit of studying on Carl Jung. He talks about the archetypes. We all have an well, we all have all kinds of archetypes.
Yes,
it depends
very true.
on what
True.
part of life we're in
Mm-hmm.
or what we're doing or what's happening. But the archetypes are the things that, does Joseph Campbell talk about archetypes? 'Cause I
Not
can't
really,
remember.
which is why, like, I think Campbell's very good about talking about, like, what I call, like, the plot structure of that kind of thing, like
Okay.
the what. And Carl Jung is very good at the who, the
Yes,
character,
yeah,
the
so
archetypes.
they come
so they
together,
complement each other really well.
Yeah, and it's like for me, the archetype that's coming out for me,
Mm-hmm.
there's a couple of them, but I
Sure.
won't talk about them. The main archetype that's coming out for me right now is the wounded healer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that is a huge, because as a wounded healer, it's the hero's journey. You go through the wounding.
Yeah.
You get to a point in your life where, like you're talking about, things start coming out. You're trying to figure things out. You move on to the next thing, and you discover it. It's a discovery. It's a journey. That's why they call it a journey. You know,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the wounded healer is a big one on this planet because we've all been wounded in some way, and at around 50 years old, we come to a place in our life, especially at that point, where we start to discover. So again, with the astrology, I'm not 100% clear on it, but Chiron is the wounded healer in is it Egyptian mythology? I don't know. I'd have to figure that. I'd have to look that up again. Another research project. But it's the wound. It's coming out and recognizing what your wounds are. What archetypes were wounded, how you can reconnect with those archetypes and rebalance yourself. And the most important thing about our lives through the hero's journey is about balance.
Yeah.
It's about balancing the masculine and the feminine and the soul with the human and all these things. And we're not put on this planet by mistake. None of us are mistakes.
Right.
We're put on this planet to allow us to be the bigness that we are.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to find that. And that's the journey. That's the hero's journey to me.
Have you ever heard of there's a book called The Wounded Healer?
Maybe.
By Henry Nouwen?
No, maybe not.
Yeah. So he was a pastor, and he talks about embracing the wounded healer, like for ministry, for ministering to people. It's really, really powerful book, just kind of hearing his journey of understanding what that means for his life.
Yeah.
And how that affected the work that he did with people.
Right.
There was something that I've heard a couple times you share regarding 4 years ago, like up until the last 4 years. So I would love to hear if you don't mind sharing. So what was kind of that turning point 4 years ago to where all of this really started changing for you?
Well, it was a relationship that was coming to an end as that relationship, as that form of that relationship.
Yeah.
The interesting piece of all of this is, before I say anything else, is this particular relationship was completely all about this part of this hero's journey. It was like we had come to the end of that piece of our journey together.
Yeah.
And as I went out and he went into his space, into following what he had to do, we came full circle. And most relationships in my world were done. We're done. Never talking to you again.
Yeah.
Now, this particular growth relationship became an even bigger experience. So 4 years ago, we were in relationship. In about April 2021, we got out of that relationship, and it gave us, both of us, space to discover ourselves because we were so locked in to, and that was, people go through relationships and there's codependency and there's all these different things that go on, but you can't recognize these things when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So it gave us the opportunity to separate and discover ourselves individually. And now we are we have been in the process, starting a few months ago, of coming back in to this incredibly powerful, beautiful understanding of ourselves and each other at that time.
Yeah.
So that's why that time frame was so important, because there's so many things. Once I left, I was able to write poetry again. I was able to, together we what's the word, sung? I don't know. He's a musician, and we were doing music together, and we recorded music, and we made these beautiful songs, and we were playing it at 432 and 440 hertz, and it was like this powerful healing in and of itself with that. But then once the separateness came, we were able to connect with ourselves and move forward. And now I'm telling you, I have never experienced a connection with somebody like this.
Wow.
Ever in my life. I didn't even know it could exist.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Something that resonates, I think, speaking for a second to the younger people who might be listening, right? I think a lot of people, even the short time I've been here, I've seen people that just really quickly get into a relationship. They might get married really quick, right? And the importance of doing that work, the importance of really understanding who you are, right? Because, man, I've seen people get into relationships and they realize that the person that they're with or the person they married is, I mean, I've always made this, kind of tongue in cheek to high school students I've worked with. I'm just like, if they're dating someone, I'm like, cool. Just know that that's not the person. They're not going to be that person 10 years from now, And, my wife and I, so we started dating when I was just going into college. She was in high school. And the funny thing is, like, the old soul thing you said is so true. Because, like, I feel like, not to, like, toot my own horn or anything, but I had done a lot of work. A lot of work before we dated.
Well, that's powerful. You're not toot away.
Well, in fact, I in my junior and senior year of high school, I abstained from dating completely.
Wow.
Intentionally, saying I'm going to spend my last 2 years of high school working on myself.
And that is typical of an old soul.
Yeah. Which I don't know. I still have not met anyone my age who's ever done that.
Okay.
But I did that because I knew that when I got into college, I wanted to be alert and awake to, to love, to what might happen.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened, And she had done a lot of work as well, but there was a lot of work that it was in progress, right? Because we didn't get married until 4 years after we were together, right? So that's a long time for a lot of people, to really get to know each other. And so being able to do that, I think it's so important to not jump into things, right?
Yes.
Especially if you're like me and you're a romantic type and you just want to jump into things.
Totally get it. I totally get it. And it's interesting because, especially with my generation, that's what we were taught to do. And not everyone.
Ring by spring.
Right? And not everyone in your generation is like that.
Yeah.
More of us
changed,
are.
Yeah.
The knight in shining armor comes and rescues the damsel in distress who's not allowed to say anything anyway. She's not allowed to be who she is, and she has to bow down.
Definitely a type of narrative.
Total narrative.
Oh, yeah.
But what I pulled from what you said is there are many ways of doing it.
Absolutely.
So your
100%.
way worked beautifully for you, and what may work for you in that way may not work for somebody else. So I just wanted to pull that out because you can make a decision and take those steps. Sometimes the best growth comes from ourselves. And then there are times when you get to be in a relationship and you've got big growth happening in the relationship as long as you can pay attention to what's happening and come in with an open mind and not the rules and the regulations of, that have been expressed in society about relationship.
Right.
And just say, look, we're in this space to grow together. You don't own me. I don't own you. I am a free person. I get to choose what I need, and I also get to communicate with you about what these things are, and you get to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And for someone to be able to understand and get into a relationship from that angle is beyond. It's beyond what anything that you can ever imagine. Because if you're holding on to this cleaving together as two souls, let no man put asunder. The man that puts asunder this cleaving is us. It's not anybody else. It doesn't matter. But when we're so in love, we're not paying attention to that.
Yeah.
And we're in the middle of a wedding ceremony. We're not paying attention to that. We want to go through the field of love, and we want to enjoy ourselves and enjoy the, reception after it and the honeymoon and all that kind of stuff. But we're not in that space to think about what's happening.
Right.
And the story there is to be able to go in with your eyes open on you, not on the other person. But each person coming in that way, where I wish you could see my hands, but maybe if you explain it. But so enmeshment and codependency look like this. So both hands are clasped,
like they're going hand in hand together.
And you're like in this thing where neither one of you can get out of it.
Right.
Where what it is, I feel, is supposed to be is a parallel journey in life where there are times where you're going to separate and go different ways, and then you're going to come back together. And sometimes you come back together more closely and you hang out and do things together, and then you separate again. And as long as both people are in that mindset, there's not going to be codependency or
right. Well, it's just creating that space, Sometimes you need a day to yourself.
Yes.
Sometimes, my wife would need a day to herself, right?
Yes.
And it's like, it's all good. We need that time, right? We need that personal time.
Yep.
But then when we come together, we'll be stronger at that point.
Exactly.
And we'll truly be one, but not lose ourselves.
Right. Exactly.
In that.
Exactly.
So I got two kind of final things I want to ask you about as we kind of start to wrap up here.
Okay.
So I'd love to hear, you've gone on this journey and now you're in the space of transformational coaching. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you got into being a coach, like in that specific direction, and what you specifically offer to people?
So as far as how I got into being a transformational coach, is my intention has always been the only way that I can help other people is having experienced whatever it is myself, because I can't sit there and hold space for you, which is a gift that I have that I know is powerful, in just being the nurturing in one aspect of being nurturing, and then in the other aspect of helping you move into whatever it is that you want to do with your life. So I can't just learn this in a book. Yeah. I have to experience it. Absolutely. It has to be part of my journey in order for me to know, especially as a highly sensitive empath. If I feel what you're feeling, I know how to, help with that. And it isn't something that I have like step-by-step processes and all this. I mean, I have guidelines on how I do it. Yeah. But I ask somebody to tell me their story. And they start to say something, and there's these words that pop out that I'll write the word down. Yeah. And then when I hear the word, I know exactly where to go with them to help them walk through whatever it is. Right. And for the transformation that I am walking, or what do I call it? Partnering somebody with somebody. I tend to just allow them at the first couple of meetings together to speak their story, because the story is where we tend to get stuck in. It's where the beliefs are. It's where the challenges are. It's all that. So when they hear that and I get to hear what it is, I'm able to open that space up and give them room to see it differently, to see themselves differently. And that's kind of how I got into it because of my own experiences. So, and I felt that was absolutely the most important thing for me to do with that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Awesome. So the final thing I kind of want to go back to is what we were talking about at the beginning about empaths, right?
Right.
Have you ever seen any of the Guardians of the Galaxy films?
No.
So there's a character in those films. Her name's Mantis. And she's actually what I would call an empath. Like, she literally can touch a person and feel everything that the person can feel, right? Which is really cool because it's like a superpower. But she's also like based on your definition, I would also consider her a highly sensitive person as well, just from, what I see in those films, right? But anyways, that made me think of that when you were sharing that. But I was wondering if, to kind of close up here, if you could just share, like, you know, a lot of people would not define themselves as empaths. So how can any person who's listening to this episode cultivate the skill of empathy and some of the ways that they can better connect with other people?
Well, to me, empathy and being an empath is a little bit different.
Okay.
So there are many variations of people with, as far as empathy goes, when you see somebody else in pain, instead of sitting there and jabbing at them or making fun or any of that kind of thing that a lot of us do to lighten the moment up, even if somebody's grieving.
Right.
Grieving is a big deal. Like holding space for someone grieving, not trying to lighten the load, not trying to do anything, just sitting there and letting them grieve.
Yeah.
That's empathy.
It's really hard not to lighten the load for a lot of people.
Right? Because it's scary.
Yeah.
Because nobody likes to feel that way, so they don't want the other person to feel that way.
Right.
So they do whatever they can to keep that from happening, but what you're doing is blocking the other person's ability and moment to do their healing work.
Yeah.
So empathy, in that's what empathy is. It's like if you see someone who's in a bad place, just sit next to them and either ask if you can put your arm around them or hold, touch them, or if they don't like that, just sit with them. Put your hands in your own lap and sit with them. And your stuff may come up, but you get to breathe your way through that. Yeah. And that will help you with the empathy piece of it. As an empath, when you start to discover that maybe you are an empath, that you have these capabilities, that you feel like you're the wounded healer, which a lot of empaths are, then you get to start, maybe like I did, was do the research. Just start looking empath. What is an empath? Why do I feel this way?
Yeah.
What's happening to me? Why is this going on? Well, maybe you were put on this planet to help people to feel their feelings because we've been taught not to.
Right.
So there you are, you know, and that's where empath and empathy come in together. Yeah. So that's probably the best explanation I can give for
that's
that.
Fantastic. And that's something that I can tell you've done with your life, and now you're helping others to do that. And so you're creating that space, and that's a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
So Caroline, where can people find you? How can they connect with you?
Okay, so right now I'm not actually doing my own podcast, and I'm working on some other things related to another podcast, but it hasn't happened yet, so don't get too excited about that. Right now I have a YouTube channel, which you can go to. It's at Caroline Rena.
Okay.
And I also have a TikTok, which I'm also doing the short videos.
Oh, see, I don't even have a TikTok. You're
You
ahead of me
don't have-
on that
Woo,
one.
See?
You're ahead of me on that.
Generation that showed me how to do that. Okay. And in TikTok, I am at Caroline Rena _peace.
Okay.
And then the other place you can reach out to me is on my website, which is carolinerena.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, Caroline, thank you so much for being on here. Thank you so much for just sharing your story and having this wonderful discussion.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Because you're 31.
Yeah.
Yay.
I'm telling you, I mean, as serious as this podcast is, like all these people who see video of me, they're like, you're so intense. And I'm like, I'm also a lot of fun, too.
He's fun. He's fun. Trust me, he's fun.
Yeah. So, well... thank you guys so much out there for listening, for being a part of this. Check out Caroline and what she does. Check out All Things Narrative and what we're doing as well. And yes, we will be back in 2 weeks for an exciting conversation. We'll have the guys back on as we dive into the next genre in our series. And so this is your friendly narrative practitioner, Derrick, signing off, saying thank you so much. And until next time, take care.